Okay, so welcome to another episode of Learning for Truth and Love. So I'm really excited to have our guest, Kalecia Simmons. Kalecia wears many, many, many hats, which I thought would make it such a treat to have her. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I do want to mention some of the hats you wear. You are a homeschooling mom, you're ex-military, you're a financing coach, you are a chef, and all of that just comes together so beautifully. And I've truly enjoyed knowing you. And just for everyone's context, I've known Kalecia mainly through our homeschooling network, and we've met a couple times. And you're in for a treat today. And so let me just give you a couple background as to why I thought you can learn so much from her today. Because of her many backgrounds and because of the children she homeschools, um, there are things that I want the audience to really understand about our Black population, which has to do with what it is that we really need, whether it's within our schools and within our homeschooling population. I want also a parenting perspective. You get a teaching perspective. So let's begin by having you introduce yourself and talk about the hats you wear, and then we'll go from there.
Well, first, let me say thank you. It is such an honor. I feel like really excited that I got this invite. My name is Kalecia Simmons, and I would consider myself today a early childhood education expert and a parenting coach. Right now, I am educating my own children from ages 3 to 18. So I'm currently teaching every single day, pre-K through college. And even with having an adult child in the university, most of the adult parents are even already going to know you still got to coach them through. I'm the homeschool guidance counselor and advisor from that angle. I'm really excited to be here and talk about being a mom of 8 children and being an educator from home. And then a little bit about too, I love that you said our needs as a community. And that's something that I'm definitely pushing for, because comparing my parenting, homeschooling, and lifestyle to the average family, I'm so far outside of the box. But I think where we have common ground as homeschooling families is we do have very similar needs. So I'm excited to talk about it.
And I'm excited. So let's start off by asking why you chose to homeschool. What was it about, your experience that led you to homeschool, your children's experience? Tell us a little bit about what got you here.
Well, I had 2 gifted students very early on. My oldest was tested gifted at 4 and was admitted into public school kindergarten at 4. And he was an early reader. He was extremely quick in math. They wanted to go ahead and put him in first grade real fast. Now, my second son, who I would say was more along the lines of the active child, was more into the robotics and the Legos and the STEM hands-on type activities. So when he did get into kindergarten, they had a hard time with his behavior and attention span. One of the things that I worked with the early school was helping them understand an active child versus my first kid, who was very by the book, very in line. So I had those 2 experiences very early on, and it kind of helped me understand that the school system itself wasn't actually equipped to cater to each individual child's needs in every single classroom at every single grade. These are like exceptional teachers that you get once in a child's lifetime that have the ability to actually hone in on them. And that is the same type of relationship that you would get with a parent. So for me, it didn't take me long to do research. My second son was expelled from school in first grade. He had a pencil and a paper clip, and he was spinning it around, the paper clip on the edge of the pencil, and it flew off and hit the teacher while she's teaching at the board. And they considered that him bringing a weapon to school. When they labeled him immediately in first grade, I pulled him out of school. We were in North Carolina at the time. We were on a military base. There were a lot of things that were being affected. My husband's job was being brought in behind it. So I just went ahead and pulled them out of school, and I started homeschooling going into the second grade for him. Now, my older son wanted to participate in band and sports in middle school. So we put him in the European middle school, thinking it would be an amazing opportunity to go to lunch, band, and maybe a different specials, gym, something like that. Well, one day he was in the cafeteria and a Ukrainian student called him a racial slur, and the school system didn't have the ability to penalize or even discipline this child for the racial slur. My son was pretty much traumatized by the experience, and during that time the gifted teacher in Europe wanted to pull him out of gifted. So it was like, it was a lot of things that they were trying to do to my children throughout the experience that I had with the public school system. When I just, you go to a doctor, you don't like the doctor, you get a new pediatrician. And that's kind of what I was doing, except for I realized it wasn't about the teachers, it was about the system. And I just did my own research and decided to homeschool.
Awesome. Absolutely. So, and one of the things I know that we all find out as homeschooling parents is we have absolutely no regrets. Our children thrive, right? Because, they have a nurturing experience alongside learning. And so they go so much further. I mean, nothing can beat that one on one. But before I go to the next question, I also want to comment that no matter what school system we're in, especially if we're in predominantly Black areas, people always talk about, oh, you're throwing money at a system and things like that to help out these school systems. But what they don't realize behind the scenes that happens is that even from a teacher's perspective, no matter how much money they pour at a system, most classrooms in Black areas never really have the privilege of having smaller classrooms, right? That predominantly white money areas would. They pour a whole lot of systems, but there's still not much smaller classrooms to actually facilitate learning, and you don't have that level of support that the other schools do. Now, what I want to talk about next is, so part of the homeschooling, I know we're required to do the regular subject areas, but what I'm curious about are two things. What outside of those regular subject areas of learning have you found most important for your child to know? And what do you think that you bring to that schooling that he wouldn't have had in a school setting?
Great, great, great question. Okay, so this question has two answers, and I will say one of the things that I know for a fact that we create for our children's learning experience is cultural diversity and travel. And so my children have actually been around the world while schooling, learning global history. So global history early on isn't something that children are getting. And the other one is financial literacy. Because my husband and I both have that financial background from the military, he's still active duty finance for the United States Army. So we understand at a global level how important financial literacy, budgeting, financing, and even something as familiar as what you're saying with funding schools, universities, all of this goes into play with global finances. So I would say taking my kids to foreign countries and exposing them to different religions, races, cultures, foods, and things like that. And then showing them the currency exchange, understanding international banking, understanding credit and debt in America, and financial literacy at a very early age. Those would be the two that I think it's unfortunate that the average school system is not giving children exposure to these two subjects.
So, one of the interesting things, because I've had the opportunity to see different settings, public, private school settings, as well as homeschooling,
Mm-hmm.
is to see that some of the differences between, let's just say, people with money and people without has to do with that nature of experiences, right? Even in private schools, you see there's more travel, involved, and there's more global focus. But then you also said something that I also see that is a different focus from what I've seen so far that is encouraged in the public school. And that is understanding finances, understanding entrepreneurship. And I want to talk to you about that because I did invite you to, even though I know you as a homeschooling mom, I did want to talk about that finances part because I find myself really thinking about that a lot. And both in terms of schooling and in terms of even personal, I got to see, for example, I get to see what, you know, the difference between, what maybe even a Black mom and a white mom,
Mm-hmm.
different friends, what they would emphasize in their conversations, um, with their kids, and how they approach teaching them finance, which I find very fascinating. So I'm curious about what your take is in terms of what you think is important for our children to know, especially related to finance. What's lacking, and what do you do? You did say a little bit in terms of the exchange and things, but what do you do to help with that?
Okay, so I think the baseline of teaching financial literacy must start in the household because the ultimate baseline and goal that we teach is legacy building and understanding that ideally you're supposed to leave the earth better than it was when you got here. And one of those things is creating a financial legacy for your family. And it is building moving forward in the future behind your family. And I think that is something that, of course, has to start at home. And then going into an educational mindset is teaching the children at an early age the value of an exchange. Because ultimately, money is an agreement and a document or a piece of paper and an exchange of services or product or something. So early on, at 2 years old, we're teaching the value system of a quality exchange and working together to build a legacy with other people. So our financial literacy program starts with our curriculum. I don't think I have a copy right here beside me. I did some videos about it last night, but we actually have a curriculum that we just launched this year that is a storybook. So we'll start at 2 to 5 years old with stories and books and even maybe like YouTube videos about exchanging money being exchanged, maybe gifts being exchanged, things like that, just to kind of get them to understand the value system. We'll do a lot of point systems and, dollar, you get $1 if you do this job, or if you do that job, you get $5. We allow our children to shop with their money. They earn money, they save money, and they shop and they spend money. So we teach them early on a very similar concept to Dave Ramsey. My husband and I taught Dave Ramsey to soldiers in Europe and Iraq. So because we were teaching financial literacy, we understood how important that was to start early, and we kind of created the elementary version of that that's culturally focused.
Mhm.
Now, growing a little older, let's say like fourth through eighth grade, we are pretty intense with how we teach financial literacy. We go very deep into investing, the stock exchange, cryptocurrency. This is when we start talking about international exchange and funds. This is when I bring back money from Turkey and Ghana and Egypt, and they get to learn about the history of those currencies. And maybe we even pull in some global history into the finance lessons. Going into high school, our children all have had jobs at 14. So they're learning money management, they're learning savings, they're learning investing, retirement, IRAs. We go, a little deeper into, they may have some crypto. Our 17 and 18-year-olds all have digital accounts right now with digital currencies. So as they grow, we add more financial responsibility. Our seniors, before they graduate, have to complete a 1 week program of eviction notice. And what the eviction notice does is it gathers everything you've learned since you were 2 years old on how to manage money, how to save your money, how to get a job, how to set aside money for utilities. It is a 1 week research project where you got kicked out and you have nowhere to go. And you've got to do I'm going to find somewhere to stay. I'm going to find somewhere to work. They go job hunting, they fill out applications, they work on their LinkedIn, they work on their resumes. This is when all of that has to be finally done. They have to purchase a car, they have to get car insurance, they have to apply for colleges. So it's
Nice.
in a week,
Mm-hmm.
in a week, it's heavy. It's a senior year project.
That's
And
awesome.
the reason why I do that is to prepare them for the absolute worst devastation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of my kids have already been accepted to college by 14. So at 18, when they're finishing up this project, or 17, when they're finishing up this project, the weight of that prepares them to steer away from that happening when they go to college. so they don't get themselves in a destitute situation. My 18-year-old was 16 when he was accepted. By his beginning of his sophomore year, he's 17 years old, turning 18. He had $2,000 in his bank account every month. I did not have to stress out if he was going to use it for parties and alcohol. He knew how to manage it. He knew how to get his tuition paid. He knew. So there was no questions. Right now, he's applying for 2 different companies. He's got that LinkedIn. He's 18 years old with a resume that looks 21 and with the financial literacy of a senior government level finance expert.
Wow, that's awesome. You know, it's amazing because I think that this is the one of the most important things that our students, that our children need to know. And my husband and I were having this conversation about, you know, the fact that this is such a large part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what is actually excluded
Mm-hmm.
completely or barely touched upon.
Yeah.
To the point where we become adults that have unhealthy relationships with money. And there's some programs I love watching because one of the things my research has led me to do, and this is doing STEM curricula, is follow the money.
Yes.
It exposes everything. It exposes how emotionally healthy you are. It exposes the way you think. And I do love watching, you know, Ramit Sethi's interviews for that reason.
Yeah.
Because you get to see, no matter who you are, rich or poor,
Yes.
your relationship with money is unhealthy. And what's interesting about that is money exposes it. But I observed that being a teacher. You know, I've taught in extremely poor areas, and I've taught in extremely rich areas, and I've taught in areas where people want to be rich. And especially in the areas people want to be rich, it really exposes that, you know, the same type of unhealthy relationship with the poor when it comes to not money necessarily, because that's not my relationship with them, but there are other things that come up. I know I diverge a little bit here.
No, you're good.
I just think it's the most important thing to teach our children.
Yeah, I totally.
Especially, it's the one thing that, well, it's one thing that has led to, you know, colonization, right? That exchange is the one thing that has been used to manipulate us. When you go looking in the history books, you get to see that people were manipulated into thinking that just because you used a different form of exchange, right, whether it's seashells or whatever it is, if you relegate that to inferior or unimportant, then the exchange is different, right? And I'm so glad you mentioned exchange because that's come up quite a bit.
Exactly.
And so I diverged and forgot what I was going to ask you next. Okay, so you covered a lot about what our kids need to know. And you had also, okay, so you had also mentioned that you work with adults.
Yes.
With finances, and I imagine that that informs what you think is important. Okay, I'll wait for you. That's fine. That's fine. So you had said that you work with adults as well. And I imagine, you know, I'm assuming here, but you can clarify that that also informs what you think is important for children to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's difficult to expect children to learn a responsible habit with finances when they're not shown a responsible habit of finances. I was thinking last week when I was in California, I went to California to just like relax and open my mind to new ideas. And one of the concepts that I thought of was how important is it to understand the way children learn and the way children learn and love, right? So children's main love language is attention, right? So not only do you always operate in your love language because you're wanting people to give it to you, you're also giving it. So because children's love language, their main love language is attention, they're constantly paying attention. They're watching. That's their biggest connection with you as their parent. And then when you think about the actual impact of how they learn is by example. They're watching you. They're paying attention. If you're not showing your children good financial habits, they will not actually display them. They're not gonna take them serious because you don't personally take them serious. So I definitely think it's very important that adults understand the importance of financial literacy. I think because we do coach families, we coach parents, we coach, CEOs, we coach in every aspect of the finance world. And one of the main baseline things that we see is people just don't have a foundation in finances. Or financial literacy, they just never got it. They never got the foundation, and they don't have solid principles or personal, what I would like to say as a character, right? A financial character. They don't necessarily adapt that ever. So to anticipate that they'll figure it out after college and being slammed with thousands of dollars of debt, and then put in a society where you have to work yourself into the ground in order to financially survive, you don't have time to even go get the financial literacy after you get spun into the rat race. So then here we are with a family with parents who were tossed out into the rat race of no financial foundation, who are trying to coach and connect with children that they're raising, and they don't have it. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's very important that we work with parents. We do have a parent curriculum book that goes with our children's book that kind of gives more base and background to the information that's in the children's book, because sometimes we are teaching the mom and dad while we're teaching the toddlers. So I think it's really important that we include adult financial literacy in this whole mission.
Absolutely. It's interesting because one of the reasons I wanted to invite you to talk about money is, something I've been thinking a lot about is our financial trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Our financial trauma gets passed on from generation to generation, but our financial trauma is also different from, for Black families than it is for white families. We get to see now, even, right now, this very moment, you're thinking of LA, right? And you're thinking of the small Black community that we know is going to be financially traumatized in a lot of different ways, right? Whether it's by insurance companies
Mm-hmm.
giving them less, whether it's by less resources going into the exchange of resources, the exchange in every way in the end does end up screwing us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it also influences even the way we interact with each other. The financial trauma. It's something that we really need to talk about and deal with a lot. One of the things I picture, and I do want to put this out there, is people talk so much about social emotional learning. You introduce financing into the education, it's going to bring out social emotional learning,
Yes.
not just, but I picture all types of social emotional learning that's going to come up for the teachers and expose every kind of bias that exists.
Yeah.
Because, in one of the last series, I talked about motivated thinking. Much of the motivated thinking that drives so much of what we do revolves around money. And one of the things we've observed, even I've had a conversation with someone who I'm thinking I'll invite her to be on a podcast. We were distinguishing between motives for choosing certain career, and whether it has to do with being socially motivated or motivated by money. I really think that the financial trauma is important to talk about. And I'm curious as to what type of, in addition to what you've mentioned, what type of financial trauma do you think, we need to work through, and you've seen, families have to work through, that informs how you teach your child as well?
I think the biggest hurdle that I run into coaching families, from parents all the way to children, and it starts with the adults. It is a generational fear. And you talked about trauma. Well, with the trauma comes the apprehension and the anxiety and the fear towards either spending, using, losing, having, needing money. There are all these things that people are either, my mama bought a house and then she lost the house. Well, the reason why she lost the house was something like you explained. Maybe that was a redlining issue. Maybe they were charging her more. Maybe they were trying to get that area gentrified. We don't really know what. So the psychology of money for our people, it runs so deep all the way to slavery, because our people were traumatized to work for nothing. So to work for nothing and to pass down the fact that there is no value to you working for nothing is what we do. And then having to come out of that with the civil rights and, okay, well, we're going to take back our dollar from the bus system. So then there's this corporate experience that our grandparents or parents may have had that, well, trying to get into the workforce and earn the right amount, there's that level of trauma, maybe not making what you're worth, or maybe not earning the value of, you know, your jobs. So then there's that layer of trauma that has been passed down. And then, I mean, and it goes like lasagna. Honestly, it just keeps going all the way up into, you know, being able to say you graduated from a university for some Black families was the height of heights, but not taking in consideration the amount of debt that maybe these families gained because of trying to gain higher education, not having access to college funding, you know. So then there's that layer of student loan debt. And I think that's my generation's struggle, is home ownership, student loan debt, just trying to barely get to where we can be comparable in society to the middle class.
Yeah.
But like, can we get to middle class as a people? And it's 2025, right? So we have so many layers of financial deficit, financial oppressions, culturally speaking. Now, on top of the things that we face culturally, there are still impacts from social and governmental things that have been forced out. My dad is a Vietnam vet, right? So because I am a descendant of the Korean War vet, the Vietnam vet, there are these socioeconomical deficits that those particular people face that they pass down. There's levels of war trauma and not being paid what they were, you know. So a lot of that is trauma that is passed down culturally. I'm seeing it in a lot of my meetings where people have never had the ability to have a vision for themselves because they were always told how they're supposed to spend their money. They don't have that financial education to understand how to learn how to grow their money. A lot of minority families struggle with finding the time because of, you know, work and obligations to provide for their family. So I am seeing the layers of psychology and money for minority families and marginalized communities. One being, if I can add it, is the military community. The military dependent community is also very similar to most minority groups, because although our family member or spouse or provider is out, you know, sacrificing and working for the nation, the amount of money that is given to those families isn't adequate or comparable to what you would consider a middle class. So there are a lot of psychological deficits that I run into. I think the biggest one is generational fears and generational financial habits. Just getting past the rob Peter to pay Paul mindset.
Absolutely. My gosh, you touch on so many things there. You know, I'm reminded of the scripture that says, the love of money is the root of all evil. It didn't say money itself is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. And I see it in every layer of our life, right? I see it in a layer where even if we had a vision, you know, to have that middle class, to develop something, we've seen it back then in the 1800s. We've seen it now, where even that vision, for example, let's talk about Mitchellville, right? Where the test was, oh, maybe Black community couldn't really develop on its own. Well, the Black community did it. And because we were successful, the love of money is the root of all evil. You know, you cannot have that vision because, you know, that is our vision. We love money more than we love people. We love money more than we love you. So then let's take it away. You know, I'm very fearful that we're going to see the same thing again with what's happening in the Black community. Is it Altadena?
Yes.
That's what's going to happen again. That it's going to be seen as an opportunity. I mean, that happened in Hawaii too, right? People were knocking on other people's door. It's interesting though that we don't view that as looting, right? We don't view that as, you know, we've legalized system where, because we've created so many layers and you're not, you know, nobody's directly taking it from you. We don't view that as taking advantage of the individual when it costs them more. right? It costs them more to lose that home and to lose that vision. So I'm beginning to understand it more and more as well as to why is people are very hesitant to buy a home, because you don't know if you're going to keep it, because the government in the town might decide that we're going to gentrify that area. So part of that process is we're going to raise your taxes so you can't afford it anymore. And so that, that generational home will be lost. And so this is where it's really important to, I don't we can't be successful without really dealing with our financial traumas, because our financial trauma and the evil that comes from loving money so much more than we love people, it'll continue to be replayed and replayed in every area. It's interesting. One of the things that was interesting to watch, my black friend, and probably even a tendency for me to think of, we'll train our child to, work for the money and earn, right? And then my white friend, is training her child to say, look, hey, let's invest
Mm-hmm.
and do this, right? And so part of it also got me reading up on, I listened to the book The White Wall, that really exposed some of the way we're blocked from investing and some of the things that we have to do sometimes secretly in order to even thrive, right? So that people don't know you're investing. We think this is equitable, but when you dig deep into the financial world, you not only see the financial trauma, but you see how that love of money has been the root of all evil. And we really need to see all of this as a moral issue. I really do think that that's why we've moved away from anything that might encourage us to deal with morality, so that that love of money can thrive, above all.
So I think what you're saying just takes me back to the point that I was making earlier about the foundation that we set with finances. So if the foundation isn't rooted in something similar or close to not about me solely, then you're going to always struggle with that internal beast of desire and irresponsibility, maybe even like poor money management character. But it's very important, and I want to just continue to like reiterate it. It's very important to have a solid foundation in your financial character, because internally you're going to always be having to look at self. That's where the growth happens. Is okay, I have this amount of money, I'm using it for this, my spending habits. Evaluating yourself first will make it so much easier to implement into a society concept of pouring your money in, or where to put your money, or how to grow your money, and understanding the value of the exchange, which is the betterment of the community. Ultimately, we take a basket of grapes, we trade it for a basket of apples. I have apples now, you have grapes now. We both have a different fruit from our both farms, right? It started that way, very, very easy and simple. But of course, we started to use paper notes and things like that to make the exchange. And that's when we got away from the connection of the person on the other side of that spend and the person that is doing the spend. And then, of course, it's so much easier to glorify something into your God or into what you're stuck on when it doesn't connect to a person. When there isn't, when you can disconnect it from a person. And I think that's where a lot of financial struggle happens. Creating a financial foundation and good character, creating a desire to contribute,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on that, and focusing on internal habits. Like, what am I doing? Why did that make me want to buy something? We taught our kids about consumerism this Christmas. Normally, we don't celebrate Christmas, but this Christmas we did.
Mm-hmm.
And every single time consumerism popped up in our environment, we learned about consumerism. And Christmas is buy this, the toys that, the ad this, the Santa's here, holiday party, blah, 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 blah. You got to get a new dress. You got to, all of the things happen during the holiday season. You're spending on top of spending, on top of spending, on top of spending. And I pointed it out to them. And then they were kind of like, They started to they took themselves out of the matrix and
Yeah.
saw it happening. And then they were kind of disgusted that it was working on them, right? Like we would go into Target and there'd be the sign and they say, "We got to get it." And I say, "Well, why do you feel like that?" Well, consumerism got you. It did, didn't it? And then they would laugh and say, "Oh my God, consumerism got me." So now they're able to separate, connect, look at things very educated. And it's just like, I think that having a 10-year-old be able to walk through Target and say, no thanks to the $40 sweater because it doesn't make sense, at all to her for the value of her dollar. That is what I want. I mean, I feel like I'm living in the dream world with that.
No, it's possible. It's possible, especially, as a living example, I realize in hindsight that I've adopted, my mom's, some of her thinking about money.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it has really helped. It's helped me to, in some ways, be frugal with certain things,
Mm-hmm.
choose what you spend on and what's important to spend on. But sometimes, just not spending, you need to understand, so what else am I doing? What else am I need to think about? And I think we were lucky to find someone who, gave us a perspective about money, But I'm thinking a lot of things. I think one of the things, you mentioned something that makes absolutely so much sense because I see it in everything we do. And oftentimes, the way our systems and institutions disconnect certain goals,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is from the individual, allows them to inflict trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you separate it from the people. Now, as a traumatized community, what advice would you leave parents with in terms of, for themselves? I'll ask you for kids after. What advice would you give, families and parents in general as adults? How should we be thinking about money given our traumatic past?
Do the one thing that everybody is afraid to do. Talk about money.
Mm-hmm.
Be open about your spending with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Show them the bank account.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Show your kids how much you saved on the computer so they can see the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Tell your 5-year-old you're saving money and actually save for something and actually come through with the something that you saved for.
Mm-hmm.
Like complete the full cycle of saying you're going to do something, completely doing it, and teaching your child that habit, teaching your family that habit, and teaching yourself that you have the capability. I think within our community, we're not going to talk about money. It ain't none of your business. Don't ask me none of that. Stay out of grown folks' business. There's all these things that don't get talked about because there's shame. There's
Mm-hmm.
no education. There is pride and ego. Once you know it, though, you got to like really stop. So
Mm-hmm.
now, after you watch this and you are now accountable, you're going to think about it. It's going to come up for you. Like, you should be talking to your kids about what your family's saving for. My kids know the grocery budget. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to ask me for the super duper cereal
Mm-hmm.
when the budget is 50. They won't ask. They just don't. We already know we have a budget. There's a reason, because we want Disney, right? So, and
Right.
we've done it. So because we've done it and we got Disney before, they're like, well, we're saving for vacation. If that's the case, we're not getting a super duper cereal. It's not a tantrum. There is no questioning. It's a part of who we are. This is what
Mm-hmm.
we do. We understand the reason why we even want the cereal is because consumerism, right? It popped up in an ad on our YouTube video. So I would say just transparency and
Mm.
honesty and openness, and open up them books in front of those kids and talk about it in front of them while they eat. Include them in why we got the off-brand something over the this brand something because they needed the on-brand shoes. Or until you can get to the point where you're financially free,
Mm-hmm.
and then their lifestyle is just, we are financially free. You break the cycle once you complete the discipline.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's there is so much shame associated
Yeah.
with
It
us
is.
and money, you know? It drives everything. I mean, I remember a parent giving me advice, a black mom, when my son was in private school, she said, "Yeah, you need to, have that car that looks a certain way." And she went, I was like, and my thinking was, I'm not going to go into debt just to look good
Yeah.
so that people can approve of me. As a matter of fact, I think it's the opposite. I think that, you know, I use things like that to know exactly where people stand. It's
Exactly.
not like I want a shallow friend. I don't need a friend that badly to want one that simply values me for that. And in hindsight, I realized, because we would take our son, especially my husband would take him shopping. And also, like you said, you can't have everything planning ahead of time. I realized in hindsight that's helped tremendously, especially when it comes to us developing boundaries. I get to see, even with relatives, those who have boundaries and those who don't. And what
Right.
happens when you don't have boundaries because you're so concerned, the concerns are different. And you get yourself into a lot of trouble thinking that the issue is, oh, I need to get another job or I need to earn more, and not realizing, well, that's not going to matter
Exactly.
because we don't have that boundaries in the first place. Nothing's going to change. And then we pass that on to our children because they don't get to see us with boundaries. Or they get to see us to the other extreme where we're just frugal and we don't really understand why you're being frugal.
Right.
So the trauma is just two extremes, right? But I want to ask, so, as parents, we want to start this and we want to educate our parents. And you did give some great ideas in terms of where to start. What other additional resources, can you point to in terms of, where would you start with your second grader, third grader, fourth grader? I know you did give some of that in the beginning, but if you can expand a little bit on, a parent wants to start today, and what advice and suggestions would you make?
Okay. So for that early kindergarten, pre-K, maybe first to second grade level, I'm starting affordably. So I'm going to the local library. I'm checking out books about money. I'm going online to YouTube. We may watch one video a week about money, and we just talk about it. We'll watch the video on Monday, and all week long, I'm going to bring up whatever the subject is of that video that we watched, and maybe we get the play money. We do a lot of activities in our living room. We have a food truck in our living room. Sometimes that happens. There's a restaurant. Sometimes that happens in the living room. So that's my kindergarten classroom. So we do a lot of role playing. We buy things with credit cards. We talk about. I tell my children when they're playing in their money games, you spend so much on credit and you don't have the money to pay the bill, you're gonna be hurting. And that's how I talk to them in their environment. Until they're old enough and mature enough to really
Mhm.
understand what I'm talking about. I take it another step up as they're old enough to do responsibilities that they can earn money for. When that happens, I create chore charts or maybe job charts, or this is when they are in the rat race. I put my kids in the rat race so when they're adults, they don't have to jump in the rat race. They're actually disgusted with the rat race. So to the point where they're immediately entrepreneurs by the time they're 17 years old. They're like, I'm starting my own business. I don't even want to deal with that. So I do that. I teach them how to earn money, how to do odd jobs. My elementary age right now, I've got a fourth grader, a sixth grader, and an eighth grader. And out of those three, we have two businesses. We've got a dog treat business, and then we've got Rally for Riley, which is her nonprofit that she started, and she sells lemonade. So we do that at that age. That's when you get into the Girl Scouts or youth league sports where you have to do car washes and cookie sales. Now we got our hands on money. That's when you get money and you can go buy something by yourself. I don't go with them in the Dollar Tree. I let them go by themselves. They make mistakes. They don't remember a receipt, so I kind of toss them into some experiences. And
Awesome.
at that age, now, like I said, resource wise, during that age, we do a lot of online and a lot of books. I don't start hammering in on things like curriculum that are solid until ninth grade, which we start Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the 7 highly effective habits of a teen. So I create habits and finances in ninth grade, book wise. And then we'll do Dave Ramsey's junior thing. They've done that curriculum. Dave Ramsey has a children's portion of his curriculum too, that talks about getting out of debt. That's one aspect of finances that I definitely think is important to teach. We have a crypto coach. So our kids sit with the crypto coach and learn videos from his YouTube channel and things like that. And then as they get to that senior year, we're doing financial planning. We're creating budget lines. We learn how to work Excel. We know how to check our paycheck. We know how much taxes are coming out. Mm-hmm. So I use the life stuff to create lessons behind. I hyper focus on it for that individual kid for a period of time until I realize they got it.
Wow. Now I'm curious, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you said?
Yes, that's a book. I don't have, I'm at my desk, not at my husband's desk, and he has all the good stuff. But yes, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a book. You can get that on Amazon.
Awesome. I was just curious about that. Wow.
That's a financial classic. And I'm trying to think if there's another one that I want to recommend publicly. They're not paying me. My husband does have a book. It's called Let's Talk About a Personal Budget. You can do this. He has a military edition and a civilian edition. But Let's Talk About a Personal Budget can start at high school. A high schooler can read this book and do the online classes. We have an online class that teaches how to get out of debt. We also have an online class that you can take on our website that helps you write letters to credit bureaus and get your credit report, things like that. So we have a ton of resources on our website.
So definitely I'll add your links so that people can see the resources that you share. I'm curious about, now what age did you say you start your kids with chores and things like that?
So chores, you get on the chore chart at 2. The jobs get real serious at 4. So at 4, you are clearing off the toddler table. You have to wipe it down with a rag. You have to make sure it's swept with the little sweeper. You have to pick up the toys. You're either in charge of the toys in the living room or maybe the toys in the bathroom. Whatever those little those little things that you probably made a mess today. Shoes in the cubbies, things like that. Those are the types of jobs that we give. Now, if it's a paid job, that looks like picking up sticks before your brother mows the lawn, right? Because that's not really your responsibility, right? You didn't make that mess. Nature did. So now you're a lawn service at 5, right? So now the lawn service should be compensated. And I teach my kids this. I'm talking right now, if you ask my 10-year-old to do something, she's going to immediately ask you, how much am I getting paid? Immediately. If it's not a job that she's responsible for, it's so clockwork with those big kids now. They just know it. So the other thing in my household is what happens at the top kind of snowballs down to the bottom. So now if I say, Andrew is 3. Andrew, can you please pick up your toys? This is your job. You're on the chore chart. How much am I getting paid? Well, you don't know how to use that line yet, so you're not getting paid.
So, wow. So how do you balance that with teaching them about service? Because I know that, in terms of people will be thinking, in terms of kids just thinking, oh, I just want to get paid. How do you balance that with? Because I know you do that.
Right. So one of the biggest things, we go back to that financial foundation, is character. And I mean, we're human, right? These are little humans with undeveloped brains. So
absolutely.
First of all, let's be patient with them because they're just like little mini, evolving things. They're not quite on. So first of all, I try to separate my expectation and lower it just a little bit because I have to give them so much more grace because they are still learning and developing. So their natural instincts as humans is to me, I, ego, all of that. And so I'm constantly reminding them about service. We do a lot of community service. Every year we do feed the homeless type situations. And because we're such a big family, I will say, this is a line I use a lot. So if someone complains about doing something that they did not create, that they feel like they should be paid for, I will say, raise your hand if you did something for someone today that wasn't your responsibility. And everybody's hand should go up. So at this point, this is the motto of how we live ultimately. If you are asked to do something in a position of where either someone needs help or you're creating a give because it's what you're feeling like should be happening, then I will check them. I check that character. That's really the only thing you can continually do. But I also display the character that I'm trying to get them to go on back to. I'm not always saying I got to be paid. It's money. It's all about money. And I'm making sure I'm showing them. Remember, their love language is attention. So they're paying attention. They're literally watching you. So they see you, give groceries to the guy sitting outside of Target asking for money. They see you doing these things. They see you waiting and letting someone else pass by. They see you putting yourself in a position to where you're in a giving or a service, volunteering type situation. And then you talk about it when you want them to display it. I think on the spot correction from kindergarten to 10th grade is important. On the spot, immediately. Lessons happen now. We're not coming back to this later because I'll probably forget. And I think that's how you really create the level of discipline that you want to see in your children and the character that they display when it comes to money or service.
Wow. Amazing. Wow. Wow. I'm in awe. And
thank you.
You're reminding me again the importance of character.
Yes.
And the importance of transparency, because one of the things that we've been doing, and I do it with my child. I'll admit when I don't know something, when I'm not sure, and I'll say, we're learning with you.
Yes.
Because we never really learned this from our parents or things like that. And I think, it's part of I think it's part of the thing that makes it difficult for us to be transparent about anything, the level of shame we feel for not knowing, and not knowing just about whatever it is we don't know.
Yeah.
We have to be comfortable even with our children. I mean, if we're not comfortable, letting our children know, we don't know this, but we're going to learn it together. Like, how do we plan to empower them? Because I did learn that, two parents, we can say the same thing, and one can empower and the other can control, right? And so I think to make sure we're empowering, as you mentioned, transparency always helps, right? Because then we know we're not driven by the shame we feel.
Exactly.
We've taken ourselves out of the picture, and so we can have a conversation about it so that they can be healthy.
Absolutely.
And we can work on being healthy together, right? You can have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
We can work on being healthy together. And so I thank you so much. My goal, we'll see how this works out, is to do a couple episodes really talking about the importance of educating on finances.
Okay.
Because I do believe that we will learn so much, not only about ourselves, even as educators, but about our children.
Yes.
And even as parents, we'll learn so much about ourselves as well as help our children. Whether we're parents, whether we're educators, we have to address this if our goal is to empower.
Yeah. Well, I got 2 moms I want to send your way.
Awesome.
Yes. My other finance friends. We're competing.
Yeah, terrific. So what are some takeaways? Any last, final advice you want to end with, or?
Yeah, for sure. I want to encourage every single person to understand we are all people. I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in our perspective and the one dimension that we're a part of that is not even close to the magnitude of all the things that are going on in our universe. And really just relaxing and being okay with not being perfect, and understanding the goal isn't necessarily to be perfect, but the goal is to continually be growing, right? And there is no destination or end for this. It is a growing, evolving, strong building person that's happening. You're building the character, you're building the habits. I have great financial habits, but I need to be better, right? So, and I'm literally a financial coach. So if I'm saying I have habits that I'm still evolving, And I can tell you, the United States Army's Pentagon finance expert has some habits that these titles and things and positions, we're all people and we all have things that we need to work on within ourselves. So understand and be patient with your children as you're working with them, as you're teaching them. Don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake or backslide. Just remember awareness, consciousness. Once you're consciously aware, you correct, then you're continually moving. Here comes the evolution. It's going to keep going. So I just want people to be encouraged, and I want them to continue to try. And I want them to focus on creating a legacy foundation for their family. Make your name a big deal in your house. Give them a sense of pride about what they're representing when they walk outside of your door. And when you do that inside of your house, what will happen on the outside with finances will also reflect excellence.
Wow. Wow. Make that time to have those conversations that you've been
Yes.
avoiding. Absolutely. Wow. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining
This
me
was fun.
today. And if you enjoyed this, please like and please follow so that you can be informed about the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you.